That's true.
Nice.
So I've been meaning to do this now for a year.
There you go.
There we go. Not going either. Okay. Call this meeting to order. First thing we need to do we have any remote participants there?
No remote participation from board members today.
Okay. Next thing we need to do is we have 2 months of minutes to approve, both January and December, because we did not have a quorum last month. Any additions or comments or corrections to the January minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve both sets of minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, moving on. All right. We have our usual period here for announcements. Comments? Announcement. David.
Yeah, I just want to make an announcement that the applications for Lisa's open City of Charlottesville seat on the board are due by March 10th to the City of Charlotte.
And I believe we had a couple of candidates express interest.
Yes, we won't see who's actually applied until that time, but I've had people reach out to me.
So you won't have to do this all alone. Other announcements?
So the Festival of the Book coming up,
Yes.
and I will be moderating the one and only crime wave panel of this year at the library on Saturday, March 25th at 11 a.m.
Great. At the Central Branch?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Always well attended.
Yes, and I've had some friends say, "Oh, I should come and support you," and I said, "No, don't come unless you're planning to buy lots of books." I want only mystery and thriller fans there, please.
Any other announcements? All right, our public comment period. Do we have anybody, members of the public that would like to comment? Anybody online, David?
We have 3 attendees listening. If anyone listening remotely would like to make a comment, you can use the raise hand function now. Going once. Going twice. Looks like no comment today.
All right. So our trustee continuing education program today is from Kayla Payne, who's going to tell us about the hold lockers.
Where I should stand. There.
Let's see. Can we see you?
For the camera.
There we go.
Don't move.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm here to talk today a little bit about our hold lockers. Included one of the social media pictures that we did during that our PR person Jennifer posted during November. It's kind of like a intro into the lockers. We'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Just to talk a little bit about where these lockers are. The lockers are at Crozet, which has the most lockers, 39. And as of Friday, all 39 were filled with unique individuals materials. Gordon Avenue has 17 lockers. Louisa has 17. Green also has 17. You'll notice we have a lot of brick in our buildings. Nelson has 17, and so does Scottsville. And I think this is the video we did. I wanted to at least play this, share this with you all, a little intro video on how they work.
JMRL now has hold pickup lockers available 24/7 at the Crozet, Gordon Avenue, Scottsville, Green, Louisa, and Nelson Memorial Libraries. Go to jmrl.org/find-it to search for materials. Choose the items you'd like to pick up and click Place a Hold. You can select whatever locker location you'd like. Here, we are selecting Gordon Locker and submitting the hold request. Now we wait for an email notification saying the hold is ready for pickup. Once it's ready, head to the locker location. Don't forget your library card. Scan your card by holding it about 6 inches away from the barcode reader. Follow the directions on the screen to check out. The door will open and you can take your materials home. It's that easy. If you have any questions, Call your local library for more information.
Library card number from their record. And then they'll scan in all of the books or DVDs or materials that that person has on hold. They can print a receipt that tells them Kayla Payne's lockers are in locker number 13. And then they take the materials out to the locker, which in most cases are right in front of or around the corner of the branch. There is an admin card that they will scan, which will give them some options to then open the manager, confirm the assignment, door comes open, the staff put the items in, and all of this is done. Staff, when they check in the materials into our system, it'll alert the patron that the items are available, and the patron comes and, as you saw in the video, scan the card, and check the items out, and they get an email receipt.
How long will they stay in there before you take them out?
Right now, we've got it set to stay there for 7 days, which is the normal hold period for any material at the branch. So right now that is what the workflow is.
If you needed to reduce that because of utilization, do you have a way to have a different hold period for the lockers versus the whole shelf?
I am actually looking into that with our software system. I just need to double check on some of those settings to see if that's possible. Staff at branches have asked about that. And I know we'd want to, if any changes were to come, we'd want to confirm that and communicate that to the public when it comes to how they're notified.
And it would make sense because if you can pick it up anytime, it's not like you couldn't pick it up this week because you can never get there between office hours. I mean, you could have a shorter period of time if you can pick it up at 3 in the morning or whatever.
So we started rolling out these lockers. The first one came here to Louisa at the end of August. So I've included some of September, which mostly was some of us staff testing out the workflow. And you got all the branches listed here. This is based on circulation data from September 1st through today around noon. So kind of see month to month what the usage has been. And these are number of items borrowed, not necessarily the amount of people. And then judging by the day of the week, we've got Sunday through Saturday. Thursdays here at Louisa seem pretty busy. But again, that's number of items borrowed based on circulation from September 1st to today.
That means that borrowed is the day they place the hold. Is that correct?
Borrowed is the day they came to check it out.
Okay.
The pickup date.
Yeah.
And then so these lockers at the 6 locations were funded through the Library of Virginia's American Rescue Plan Act grant. Part of that was to encourage libraries to expand access to services during COVID. The Friends of the Library Endowment also supported, also paid for some of these, as well as the Grove Nelson Fund.
Looks like Nelson needs to get revved up.
And yeah, I think I had a slide for questions that I must have accidentally deleted, but anyway, we have done some promotion of these. We did a blog post that included that video that you saw. We've been working with staff on clarifying the workflows and dealing with any bugs and kinks that have come along. so far, so good. I think I'm hoping to work with all the branches to make sure that the procedures are working well and that any patron issues and complaints might be addressed.
And so it'll be part of, for those of you who can stay while Ophelia gives a tour of the building after the meeting today, Kayla's also happy to show us how the locker works out front.
Got a hold ready for pickup. Any other questions about the lockers?
Yeah, I mean, I really think, I think they're great. I had a bunch of stuff put in the locker and then I realized that I didn't need to because I wanted to go in the library anyway, but, yeah, I mean, I think our next issue is obviously capacity. Especially Crozet, but, you know, obviously the other branches too. So, you know, I think they're a great addition. I'm glad we did.
Yeah, I'll just give some props to Kayla for really managing this project from day one she got hired. And it was basically like, oh, hey, here, we're gonna do this thing. You're in charge of it. Good luck. And it's a project.
What are the sort of ongoing costs? I assume there's some maintenance and maybe a software license and so forth. Just what's the kind of the level of that ballpark?
I think the yearly maintenance starting next year is for all 6 lockers is maybe $1,700 per year. And then the lockers themselves, I can pass along the information to you.
Do we own those or lease them in some way or just?
We own them.
And they are modular. So I don't know if you saw Crozet's there, it had one unit that's going to be similar to the one that you see here, where it's you know, the brain, and then you can add the locker space to the side. So you know, Crozet is kind of, they're all in tight spaces, so there's not a lot of room to expand where they are, but potentially we wouldn't need to get the most expensive one. It would be one with just lockers, depending on the physical setup.
And this is probably a question we don't even need to think about now. Do we know what the useful life of these things is? And obviously, they probably haven't been around long enough for other branches or libraries to say, yeah, we got 5 years out of ours. Or...
So this outdoor model is relatively new product from this company, but they've had lockers in the past. I know there's a company 3M that Biblioteca bought out, that there are 3M lockers that have been at the Valley View Mall in Roanoke for like 15 years.
Okay.
They're much different type than these, but I think the longevity, I think as long as they're willing to support it, and as long as you can get a maintenance plan with them, we're able to keep them going.
And they're inside too,
Yeah.
so they're not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they certainly seemed heavy duty. I mean, it did not seem like they were cheaply made, that's for sure. So that's a good thing. Okay.
We got a lot of support from our jurisdictional partners on this too. For example, the locker you're going to see out here, the county had to move a sign out of the way and then had to come and help do some electrical rewiring there. So everybody was very excited about the project and worked well together to make sure it got done as quickly as possible.
Any other questions for Taylor? No, this is great, and I really appreciate it, and thank you for coming all the way out here.
He's online.
Yeah, Tony, it looks like Wendy has joined.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I didn't get any sort of request in advance for remote participation, so I think she's just attending as unless we hear otherwise.
Okay. All right. All right, up to committee reports, and the first is a report from the library name working group. David will deliver.
Yes, thank you. This board can expect the full report from this committee to discuss at your March meeting. So the working group is finishing up work, which is a synthesis of feedback and a recommended procedure for JMRL to use should the library's funding jurisdictions request JMRL to review the library name, or should the jurisdiction cede that authority directly to JMRL in the regional agreement. So the last meeting was finalizing wording on a presentation and a report for the board. We're going to go review it at least one more time and then submit it to the board for discussion next month.
Questions? Good. Everybody show up in March. Because I know they've been working very hard on this, and a lot of input was gathered, and so it's important, I think. And the 5-year plan committee has a report.
Yeah. We had our first meeting, and our next meeting will be March 8th. David is working on collecting peer data about other library systems so that we can take a look at sort of how they've been doing their plans, just to get the juices, the creative juices flowing as we start this project. And a suggestion was made that we all thought was pretty good to match it to JMRL's values rather than to the 6 goals that we've had in the past. And so those are that's like technology, those are in the past, but to match it instead to the values, and we'll sort of play around with that, I think, in the next couple of meetings.
Yeah, I think if it works, so we don't want to shoehorn something.
No.
It makes sense. And the goal areas are access and outreach, technology, staffing, collection, finance, and facilities.
So that's something that we're thinking about, but we are very much in the early stages of it, and I think in collecting a lot of information, and we're going to be probably dividing into smaller groups to do some more intensive work. But I think that we've talked about a variety of things, and one is to keep it more of general goals rather than to go quite so much into the minutia for the plan itself.
Talked a lot about how the technology committee adopted the technology plan to be a list of board level goals and staff level objectives.
Yeah. Yep, dividing that up a little bit to make it a little more clear and easier for the public to figure out. So I think that's about it.
What's the timeline for your committee?
5 years. Oh no, wait. 1 year. Rush me.
That's right.
It says it all in the name.
Who's writing grants to whom? I forget.
The board will have to vote on an adopted plan by June of next year, 2024.
It is 5 years, but you've already used up 4 of them.
David started us really late on this process. Clearly, as soon as we turn in the 5-year plan, we should be working on the next one.
Questions, Meredith, David? All right. Policy committee report, Mr. Bowers.
Okay, the policy committee met today and discussed 3 topics. The first is a draft of public comment at library board meetings. We discussed this for 3 meetings running, and today we reviewed some kind of final input from our lawyer, and which we'd run it by as sort of the last step, and made a few tweaks to that. The version you have in your handouts is the final version that the committee is recommending to the full board. So we're able to have a first reading of that here later in our agenda today. We discussed, also we've been discussing for 3 meetings, but we got a little further, the Public Employees Code of Ethics and Library Employees Codes of Ethics. And both of those, each of those currently are adapted from other organizations. We follow the City of Charlottesville's handbook, which I think our current version is adapted from 2 versions ago of City of Charlottesville. City of Charlottesville has recently published a new employee handbook. So we're going to end up recommending, I think our current plan is to just provide a link to City of Charlottesville's handbook rather than sort of calling out specific bullet points. Those bullet points will be put into the employee handbook so that the employees have a summarized view of what they need to know, rather than because I think the points are within the City of Charlottesville are spread out among multiple pages in different spots. But I think from a policy standpoint, what we're working towards is just providing a link to the City of Charlottesville and kind of just letting the public know that that's what we follow. And I think what we're working toward is consolidating that together with the library Employees Code of Ethics. Again, currently that's adapted from the ALA, as a library code of ethics. That has changed since our adaptation. So we're looking at an approach of keeping the same approach of adapting presenting a JMRL adapted version of the ALA's Code of Ethics, Library Employees Code of Ethics. So that work is ongoing. We'll probably, I think we'll be at a point where we made some conceptual choices today, and I think we'll be looking at actual wordsmithing at our next meeting. I don't think we'll have in the next meeting would be 2 months from now. I don't think we'll have a recommended version at that meeting to present to the board. So probably, but I think 4 months from now would be the goal, to have that final version up to the board. So just in terms of expectations of time frame, that's probably what we're looking at. Lastly, we started looking at policy 4.224, patron confidentiality. That was actually last reviewed by the policy committee and adopted by the board. We've been saying adopt and adapt a lot today. So adopted by the board in 2019, but it's based on there's some portions about the age of adulthood, and it has implications for parental consent and access to records of minors. And it's kind of come to our attention that there's a state law that's kind of vague, and there was this in 2019 we worked with the state to get some interpretations of that law, and the state has sort of changed their interpretation now. So we're a little bit unclear whether our current policy, we're unclear what the law really says or means, because it's written in a confusing way. So we're kind of unclear on whether our existing policy is in compliance or conformance with this state law that we don't really understand. So we're taking the step of asking our library attorney, what does the state law mean? Does our existing policy comply with that or not? And if based on depending on what he says, we'll discuss, we'll take that into account and discuss whether any changes need to be made. And if so, we'll end up bringing forward a recommended version to you all. So that's just by way of a progress update. Again, it's conceivable actually that we would, if it's a small thing that we just have to change one number, it's conceivable that we would get that wordsmithing done at our next meeting in 2 months and have a version for you 2 months from now. So that's pretty conceivable. Okay, any questions about any parts of that? All right, thank you.
Which leads us to the potential first reading of policy 1.261. Pull that up there.
There are two things in the handouts. One is the current policy that is on page 6. And since it is effectively a new policy, there's just a whole revision there, not a redlining. But hopefully the board had a chance to look at it. The one in red is the new proposed policy. The goal here that the policy committee had was to provide guidance to the public on what to expect when they came to make public comments. So we didn't substantially change or alter any of the decisions that the previous policy had, such as there's still a 5-minute limit for each individual comment, but there's some clarifications about what you should expect when you show up.
Well, I think the other major change is that in our current policy, it's unclear the length, and this did come up at one of the meetings, what was the time, the overall time period. It just said if there are available public slots, I'm looking at number 3, then the remaining slots, but it doesn't define how many slots there are or how long do you take for this entire public comment. So another major change, and I suppose we'll probably read through all of it, but I'll just highlight this. In number 1, we're proposing that we predefine an expectation that up to 1 hour will be at the beginning of the meeting if we need that much time. And then we didn't want to limit it to only 1 hour, but we said, okay, if we don't get through everybody in 1 hour who wants to speak, then at the end we'll kind of reopen up in the unlimited or unbounded time period that we have now. But we move it to the end so that we can make sure we get through the main business of the meeting with no less than a 1 hour time period. and I'll make one other super, just for clarity, if you'll go to the title of this, it says December 22, but it's actually the February 23, because there were some changes between December and February 23, but this is the latest version that we're proposing.
There was one question, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Let me read through, I'll just read through all of them in order in a summary way. I'm not going to read every word, but then we'll come up to that point. So just an intro that we want to hear from the public, that we do have this opportunity to comment publicly at each meeting. As I just described, it will be an hour, up to an hour at the beginning, and then if we need more time, which happens once every 5 years maybe, then there's time at the end. We're recommending to retain a 5-minute time period, and clarifying that you only get one period and you don't yield time to other individuals. So that kind of limits the opportunity to, do back and forth. That's not really the intent of public comment period. It's not a public forum for back and forth discussion. It's, hey, submit what you want us to hear, and then there's other points where there's kind of a discussion. We're requesting but not requiring you to state name and jurisdiction. Just clarifying that hybrid applies to public comment as well as meetings if we are conducting in a hybrid mode. Clarifying that you don't have to be here in person to submit your public comment. You can submit it sort of in writing in advance. Sort of asking, number 6, I'm on, a little bit about decorum during the meeting. We want to make sure that audience members respect the purpose of public comment, which is for people to be able to comment, and suggested some guidelines around that. Number 7, there was some discussion about is it possible to let's see what we had before. So comments of it just says there's a topic of, if you want to have something to say about it or feedback about a specific library employee, and by the way, that could be positive or negative feedback. We wanted to clarify. So our legal advice was that we cannot really monitor or restrict the content of what people say. We can't say, well, you can talk about these topics, but not these others. So this is really more of a communication to the public that the board does, because people don't know that the board doesn't supervise specific employees directly. That goes through the director, and that here's sort of the recommended channel to get your feedback into us is to talk to the director or forward that to the director, and there's some mechanisms to do that. So that's more of a communication about, really, this is our best practice, but it can't be a hard and fast requirement. So it's not. And then we retained, number 8 is retaining our existing policy that public comment is not a back and forth between the board and the public. It's sort of a one-way, and then we will take that feedback into account and follow up in various possible ways. And then just a closing about the library board president's role in monitoring time and ensuring kind of the orderly conduct. The president may take steps to maintain order. So we did have one suggestion, and there was some that we discussed it in the committee, that whether there should just be a period after maintain order and essentially strike the kind of communication about what circumstances might give rise to the library board president taking steps. On one hand, this communicates to the public sort of an expectations about these are the types of things we don't feel would be acceptable or would be undermining the purpose of a public comment period. On the other hand, by including them, by striking those, you might give the president more flexibility to handle situations that weren't specifically enumerated. So that would be, and the committee was we could go either way on that. So we didn't have a strong consensus. People didn't have strong feelings one way or the other. So if anyone from the board does, then this or next month would be your opportunity to kind of weigh in on that. But I think we've, as far as a starting point, this is where the starting point would be. If no one wanted to make that change.
We did have one comment from a member of the general public who was.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
kind of alluding to. We discussed that feedback also included some support for some of the other things that are in the draft, like the 5-minute time period and so forth.
And I think the fact that we were just requesting people to state their name and jurisdiction, we weren't going to require it.
Yeah. Okay, so now is the opportunity for questions if it's unclear what the intentions or the any questions here, or maybe initial reactions or discussions, but otherwise this would come for a vote at the next meeting.
So did we look at what other jurisdictions did? Are people normally doing 5 minutes?
So
It's usually
3, yeah, I think it's,
County does.
we find other 5s.
We, I don't remember seeing another 5. I remember seeing a lot of those. We did look at all of our jurisdictional partners at their stated rules here. We didn't do as many other libraries.
But we did have some.
We did a few.
I think
a few libraries. Yeah.
I mean, we probably looked at 10 other
Yeah.
things, and some of this, we picked, as usual, we kind of pick and choose for specific language for some of these points of just how they're worded. I mean, a lot of them were similar conceptually, but I know you're asking specifically about 5 versus 3. I guess the answer is we certainly saw.
My recollection.
Yeah, I would agree with the recollection we saw.
Well, and the other thing too, I mean, going from this past year when obviously we actually had the public comment policy invoked several times, is that I haven't had to cut off people more than probably a quarter of the time. Most people can, get it done in 5 minutes, whether that's, but, there were some where I could see the clock ticking and we're getting to 5 minutes and then.
Oh, I wasn't asking for any longer.
No, I know you won't.
Most of them could have gotten it done in 3.
I'm sure some of them could have got it done.
No, but I don't want to feel like we're taking away from anyone. And
Yeah.
obviously, we're not going to have 75 people trying to comment, but it is a very long day when we do. And when we add another hour and a half to the meeting. And then I guess, but I do like what you said, which is keep it to an hour before the meeting so we can actually get the meeting done, because I think that was.
I think that's something that obviously the city tripped over when they would have the public comment and keep going and keep going and keep going, and then the agenda was at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I will say to the 3 versus 5, you see that this was revised in 2016. So we're rediscussing this before the 10-year time period, but it's partly because we noticed there's some things that are just vague in terms of that, hey, what is the number of slots and what are these time periods, and just based on the experience. But I attended some of the meetings in 2016 when it was discussed. And as you may be alluding to, there was some interest in, hey, if we could get it, if people can get it in 3, that respects everyone's time, including everyone in the audience. There was some, I'm just kind of conveying some of that discussion forward that I recall. Somebody said, well, a 3-minute really requires you to be concise to get your point across, which is good, but it's also an issue that not everyone who wants to give us feedback that requires a skill in and of itself. And so what the argument that won the day at that time was it's sort of more inclusive to give people the 5 minutes. So that was the balance that they landed on, to put it that way, in terms of the tension between trying to be efficient with time versus making sure everybody has the ability and an opportunity to tell us what they need to say. So I'll just bring that forward and you can think about it. But yeah, we do have to decide if it's 3 or 5 or whatever else.
Having been a speaker at various meetings, I think the 5 is a really wonderful thing. It's hard to integrate and really get the point across. And I think that that is an important way of relating to the people that we serve.
I also don't think, I think it's a certain, there's certain optics of taking away 2 minutes, even though possibly quite a few of our speakers actually got up, spoke, and were done in 3 minutes. And it wasn't, but I don't, it was uncomfortable every time you had to cut someone off, Tony, and I know that you did not like it. And so because we're, it's like saying, you've told us enough now, which is not exactly the message. It's kind of saying, we have to keep going because we have to get business done too. So that's a good point. As I said, I like the change to sort of say, okay, and then we'll have more.
Yes, right.
After we
I
actually
think
get
that's
stuff done.
a very good
Yeah.
thing to state. We're not going to cut you off. We might have to do the business of the library, and then we will return to
Yeah.
prominent hand.
But you're right, you said this is only about every 5 years.
Well, I think the more than an hour is probably, this was, yeah, probably 10 years, or more.
Even in the first time that we really invoked public comment policy, which I think was July, was it June when you were still in the charge, John? Yeah. We made an hour. There was an hour of public comment, but we were done at the end of an hour.
Yeah.
Also, I'll remind the board that we do have a separate public hearing policy that likely we should have invoked at that time and said, hey, we're gonna have a meeting without business being conducted, just to hear.
Oh, should that be in this policy?
It's up there at the top.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, so we did discuss whether we should define a threshold and, if there would be a trigger, a circumstance that would trigger that. And the problem is we don't know, because we're not requiring you to register in advance. We don't really know until the day of that we can probably have a general idea in some cases. So we weren't really able to identify, a trigger that would help us before the day of the meeting understand whether we needed to have a public hearing. But it is an option that we always have if we think there's going to be.
If there's a particular topic that a lot of people would like to come and speak about.
Although I would say, let's say we did that, there's a topic about hold lockers, okay? People are doing like they're unsightly, and we don't want them anymore. And we said, okay, we're gonna have a public hearing about hold lockers. I still don't think that would override our the idea that we're still offering an hour. This would still apply anyway.
Yeah.
You'd still have an hour in the other time. So in that sense, I'm not sure what the public hearing accomplished, other than those commenters would have had a forum and maybe they won't feel like the business meeting is their only place then to get their feedback out.
I like the idea that the speakers are not yielding. Because, like, okay, all of you guys come with me. I'm going to say it for 2 minutes and then I'll give it to you. So now you have 8 minutes. No, that doesn't work.
Are there comments for?
Can I tell you, I might be interrupting here, but can I tell you what the Newton County Board of Supervisors does here?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure.
First of all, we allow 3 minutes per person.
Right.
And
And
for most,
Albemarle County does that too.
and for most person, a lot can be said in 3 minutes. If it's somebody representing a group, another organization, they have 5 minutes. And if it's a big room full, and sometimes we get there, unfortunately, the chair can reduce the 3 minutes to like a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Right.
And so it's all about what the chair wants to control. The other things there, as far as people not applauding, they'll do that regardless. You can't, once it's done, what are you going to do? But basically.
Kick them all out. I could kick them all out. Oh, wait, no, I can't do that.
You've covered, look like most everything you need to cover.
Zoom lets you decide how much you're going to.
5 minutes is a long time.
Yeah, believe me, I know.
Thank you, Mr. Judges.
Thank you for that. That's helpful.
So we will.
So do you want, would you, as the president, would you like to have more control over? You could say, you get 2 minutes.
Need a digital gavel.
Say a gavel, that's how you clear the room. Yeah.
So what about the issue at the very bottom of that? Do we want to shorten that up, or do we want to keep it with the Do we want to put the period at maintain order? And eliminate all of the, if the speaker or crowd becomes unruly, derogatory, personally abusive towards specific individuals, or general disruptive of the conduct of the board's business.
Well, I mean, I think if you put the period after maintain order, it gives the president more leeway. Okay, so you're vesting more power in the president if you do that. If you leave that in, you know, with those particular conditions, and the president has some other reason he wants to cut off, you know, the comment, you know, that might be almost, you're really ceding a little bit more control to the president than if you had these in, and that's the only reason the president can do this. Again, it says may take steps.
It just also gives the president, if he gets goes things get out of order, he can recess the meeting, or he can stop the meeting at that point. So there's ways that you work around that.
Right. It doesn't, either way, it wouldn't specify what the order maintaining steps would be.
Right, yeah.
It's just, we're really speaking to, do we want to be more explicit about what some of those conditions would be that would trigger steps, whatever those might be, or do we want to just leave it that we're, I mean, if there's still, I think, a strong implication that you're only taking the steps for the purpose of maintaining order. So it's not just because we're tired. It's too late now.
It's not involved now.
Well, that's actually one thing I was thinking here is, you know, my first inclination was I think the language in there is fine as a sort of fair warning to anybody who is reading this and considering making public comment, that it draws a pretty clear line in the sand that, you know, this sort of conduct is not going to be tolerated. And I think, you know, a phrase like generally disruptive of the conduct of the board's business gives the chair, you know, a fair amount of leeway to say you're being generally disruptive, please get out of here. Now, in the first part of the sentence, if you were to end it after maintain order, I think it actually reads a lot more as in the president is responsible for monitoring time and ensuring orderly conduct. And so then the flexibility you get, I think, is not in necessarily saying you are being disruptive and I'd like you to leave, but is there a benefit to being able to say, we need to change things up to move this meeting along in an orderly fashion? But I'm not sure that, you know, again, this is a policy that's specifically talking about public comment. So if we just have another board member who wants to pontificate on something like a policy change, you know, maybe this isn't the policy to apply to that person. But I'm inclined to say I'm fine with leaving it or taking it out if anybody feels strongly, but I don't think that it's particularly, in the context of the rest of this, I don't think it's particularly constrictive to keep it in.
Yeah, one question that I had, Thomas, is that we don't actually say that when you speak that you cannot be unruly, derogatory, or personally abusive towards specific individuals. We say that you can say whatever you want.
That's, you know, that's first.
So then the question is, I mean, I'm imagining you're imagining that the crowd is responding or something. But that does seem a little bit like we're saying you're not allowed to say certain. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I've thought of the intent of this as, because we're 1 through 8 are kind of specific about speakers, and this is a general about the room, right? That's how I had been thinking about it. But I always say if that's not clear, we need to make it clear.
But I would recommend stopping at order because I think that, you know, I think that the president would not be one, and probably would not be one to be like, oh, I think these needs, and so therefore there's not order and everyone has to leave. I think that they would say, okay, this is a situation where we have to stop it. It would have to be kind of a breakdown. But I'm expecting too much in the future board members.
Not really hearing a consensus one way or the other here.
I think what I hear is one person has a preference and no one else really does.
Do I overrule? No.
You get ejected, Meredith.
Oh, wait, my ride.
Yeah.
So.
Strictly going on a vote on that basis, you would put the period, and that would be what you would propose for next month.
Right, right.
Or you could put, say that,
Including.
such as, but not limited
Yes.
to.
Exactly. Thank you, wordsmithing.
I think I'm gonna wanna leave that up to the policy committee to
Yeah.
decide, and then
Yeah.
when you bring it up to us for a vote, it could be.
Next month, policy committee won't.
Sway us.
Yeah.
Try to sway us one way or the other.
Unless you're.
I mean, I'm happy to do that, but this is the starting point version.
Yeah.
It's really a board
The board decision.
at this point, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So in some sense, we already did that. I
Yes.
guess.
I'm in favor personally, I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is. I think, again, and may take steps is,
Mhm.
doesn't say it will.
Mhm.
I like Alina's thing about, may include, or up to and including, or something.
Yep, something
No.
Yeah. such as.
Getting the president with the giveaway.
So if we did that, we would need a specific wording to look at next time, to vote on.
Right.
We could certainly take that offline, and I think it would be fun, to me, you're the president. It would be fun to proceed next month with a minor word change. I mean, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
We didn't read this month, so we
Yeah,
could.
'cause I think in general, the way that the policy committee has set out a more complete set of rules for this is much better. I think that, we have something to point to now. I think, but as you said, I don't think anybody's going to quibble with the fact that we have 5 minutes.
If I could, I'd like to make another comment, because sometimes you get in these meetings. I've been on the board of supervisors for 20 years.
Right,
and
yeah.
I'm chair, vice chair, so I've been through a lot of these different things. For example, last week, we had a topic that was there, was going to be quite controversial. We had a room full of people. And the chair, president, decided, well, it's best if one of us board members make a comment about that subject matter before the public comes. And what it did, it calmed down the public, because they were really ready to explode on us. But by making a comment and really bringing them up to date, it was a budget item that we'd already talked about that particular day. It calmed down the meeting, and the people were, instead of repeating what, and I was a board member, made the presentation, repeating what I said, they were able to jump right into the business matter. So it's very important that the president has the authority to make some adjustments.
Right.
And sometimes our chair, but a lot of speakers speak on the same thing. He may interject and say, remember, we don't normally do this. We don't communicate back and forth, but there needs to be a statement made here. He would make a statement. So, and if one of the board members we always have the authority, if there's somebody speaking and we want to recognize them and communicate, we can do that. But there are 3 things there that you don't normally want to do.
Right.
But I think the way this thing should be written, the president should have the authority to do some of this.
Well, I think, in terms of the public comment that we've had over the past year, we have done that. We've done what you were suggesting at the beginning of some of these sessions. We said, okay, now here's what's happening. Here's what you may have heard, but here's what's happening. So if you're going to comment on that, perhaps you would like to comment a little bit different. So,
So as we all know, some of the meetings can get very ugly. And they can get almost beyond control. It really can. So, but we take the approach. We want to communicate with the public. We're glad they're there. We want to hear what they say. But at the same time, it has to be an orderly meeting, or it just gets ugly. But thank goodness you don't have many public people come with us.
Tony, are you asking that maybe you can get this back to staff and maybe just Mike and I, you and I can work on a proposed change, a tweak here, and then the board, we can put that in the policy, in the board handouts next month, and they can review it at that point. If they don't like it, we can still kick it back again.
yeah, we can just go another. Yeah, exactly. So,
Does
okay.
that sound like what's on the table?
Yeah, is that okay with everybody? Okay, let's do that.
So that gives Alita or anyone, if you have a specific
Yeah.
wording change, it's on Saturday.
You said, write that down. She goes, yeah, I remember I said, right.
And Thank you and policy committee for all your work on this. I know this was a hot button issue.
Well, as we discussed, there was a lot of discussion, over 3 meetings, some of the same types of questions that are here, but we wanted to give you a strong starting point.
Okay. Next up, we move on to old business, and first up is the NAACP JMRL scholarship update.
Yeah, I can give a report on that, Tony. Alita and I met to work on this. Alita and myself and a member of the NAACP Education Committee served on the scholarship committee last year. So I added some parameters to the scholarship which weren't in place last year, just again to kind of clarify what was being asked for here. So that includes an age limit of being 17 or entering a senior year, limit on the number of times that individuals are eligible for the scholarship internship to be 2. Notice that the individual has to live in the JMRL service area, so Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa, or Nelson, and request for a resume and an application form to help organize the submission. So just some things that we identified through the process last year that needed to be cleaned up a little bit to make the selection a little bit smoother. We've shared this with our partners at the NAACP to get feedback. We're going to start collecting applications with a due date of April 14th. So thank you, Alita, for your help on that.
Questions about that? Comments? Okay.
Do any of our libraries help with resume?
We provide the resources available, like we can book you space on the computer, time to do that. You can book one-on-one tutorials for a specific task that you're trying to do. I don't think that we have, I can't think of any right now, a resume writing for teens workshop, but that's a good idea. We could certainly
I
touch
just don't want it to make it so that someone couldn't apply. I had to just recently work with my kid on a resume, and it's the first one's really hard. You've never done it before. And then after that, if it's updated, but
I think we could offer one specifically for like, hey, if you're interested in these scholarship opportunities,
you could email this address and we'll help you or something. I don't know.
thank you, that's good feedback.
A lot of time the guidance department at the public schools works with that too. But, we have homeschoolers.
That's needed in high school, I think, even for most job applications, but I think it's like as soon as you shift into college, everyone that they can start asking for it, right?
All right. And budget update, please.
Okay, so the first of the proposed budgets has come in from Albemarle County, who is recommending full funding for JMRL's request for next year. So that's very good news. That does not include a central library renovation. It is explicitly named in their budget doc, which is a step basically. And the language that was there describes it under the category is not recommended to be included in the CIP at this time. Projects that require further discussion with the city of Charlottesville due to either jointly owned facilities and or services that provide substantial benefit to city residents and are currently not reflected in the city's capital improvement program. Jefferson Madison Regional Library, this request of $7,194,351 represents the county's proportional share of the complete renovation of the central library in downtown Charlottesville, estimated to cost double that, $14,388,702. This project would involve a total renovation of the interior of the central library to add public space for additional meetings, technology, and youth services. So there are 3 other projects in that general category, 2 from Region 10 and 1 from the free clinic. So at this point, Albemarle County is not recommending a central renovation in their CIP. However, they left the door open for it to basically say, if the city puts this in their CIP, that's the step that they're looking for there. So we will continue to have conversations with staff and elected officials on both ends there. It's good news about full funding for the operational budget. This means that the board's priorities there, that's a big step towards getting those funded for next year. The capital improvement one is a bigger project that likely will require even more work. I'll be going to the Louisa Board of Supervisors budget meeting next Monday on March 6th to discuss JMRL's budget for fiscal year 24. And at that point, we'll be explaining to the board there about the proposed bookmobile services that JMRL is offering for next year. And so far, those are the 2 scheduled meetings with boards.
You have one scheduled for doing.
Green has scheduled a workshop, but they have not specifically invited JMRL to come. So
Oh.
we can certainly go. Make comment. I'll call you and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Green's funding is fairly level from last year, so we're not expecting a major change there, but it's always good to talk about what services are being offered and what the community is getting back from the library.
Question about the budget?
Can I make a comment about the Louisa budget since you're coming next
Monday.
next Monday?
Good news, only good news.
Well, I just want to bring up, Dave, what happened. Last week, we had the whole board had their first look at the proposed budget from outside agencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we made the first cut. So what you're going to be there with others on the 6th to give us some further explanations, and which is typical procedure. It doesn't mean yay and nay or anything at this point. That is the way we do our procedure.
Yeah, no, we're well used to working with the county on that and come in and explaining how their resources are being spent. So happy to do it.
Anything left for the library director's report?
Sure. I sent you all an email about the change that's happening on the first tier from computer use only cards over to in-house use only cards, just in anticipation that you might get some questions about it from members of the public. So if anybody needs any clarification on that, I'm happy to do so now. It's going to get JMRL in compliance with policy 4.221 library card eligibility, where it says that computer use only cards are not used to circulate materials, and we have been doing that with digital materials with computer use only cards. So we're making that change to change the name a little bit. We've reached out to all the users active on the e-library last year with computer use only cards to alert them to this upcoming change. All in all, I think it was, Kayla, 200.
200 active.
About 200 active users. So Brittany reached out to them already and has been working with them. Some of them were interested in out of area cards in order to keep access. Some of them decided, okay, they're not going to have access to JMRL's e-library anymore, and some of them will need some follow-up still. So just to keep you up to date on that. Any questions about that before I move on? The drive up project at Gordon Avenue, things are happening. We're expecting to start that project this week. The network rack in the back of the building had to be moved. There is an issue with the window itself. Apparently, while a lot of supply chain issues have improved, windows and doors are not one of those. So the construction project is likely to finish on time by the end of May this year, but it's going to be a board until the window comes in midsummer.
So they can still lift it up, right?
That actually it's not horrible for the timing of these things, because there is a required position that is requested of Albemarle and Charlottesville in order to fully make this service happen, and that wouldn't begin until July at any rate. So it's not the worst thing in the world there. Yeah. At any rate, it will be very lovely. The book return there is going to be out of service starting this week until the end of the project. There's another book return next to the locker that Kayla showed earlier up on the porch there, but the drive up one is not going to be available throughout the life of the project. It's going to be a better one after that. It's going to be a bin with a depressed floor on it, so more materials can fit in there. But that's part of the project, so it's going to take a little while.
Are we going to have a sign up that says this book return not working over here?
Yes. So,
Devils like me who forget.
the whole drive up area is not going to be available during the life of the project. The contractors will be parking their vehicles in there. You won't be able to do that.
Okay.
So. The director's mid-year goals, I got asked about this as annually around this time, usually a bit earlier in January. I would make kind of a mid-year report on goals that were provided to the library board last summer. This year, we didn't actually present any to the board. There was no list of here are the prioritized goals for me. So I just wanted to keep you up to date on major projects this year. Most of which you're already aware of, but moving the Central Library project forward. So we've had more constructive conversations between JMRL, Charlottesville, and Albemarle than years past, but more importantly, between Charlottesville and Albemarle on this front. So those two are talking specifically about this project in a way that I don't think they have done for a while. So that's good. Conversations between myself and staff and elected officials. We're looking to build off this momentum. We've also worked with the city on a security and safety review of the central library, as well as looking at ADA accessibility issues there, just as more information for our jurisdictional partners about what the needs are there. Of course, a lot of time this year has been taken up by questions about JMRL's name. This has been a difficult process, but a necessary one for the library. I tried to provide a transparent process to allow for the entire community to be heard. We're expecting a report next month from the working group on that. And then finally, a focus on expanded services and meeting families where they are. I can't take credit for the lockers out here. As I mentioned, Kayla gets the credit for that, or the pod, the privacy pod that Ophelia will show you in a little bit. But I've helped to create an environment for those things to succeed. So thanks to the staff for that. It's been a big push in the last few years there. I wanted to share that Charlottesville recently participated in a national community survey, and the results came out last week. And 88% of responses rated public library service as excellent or good. Of the 36 services, respondents were asked to rate. Public library service was second only to the fire department at 91% for excellent or good. So plenty of support in the Charlottesville area for library services. That report is available online from the city's website. You can go see.
And then survey also come out to the counties.
I believe that one was Charlottesville only, and it was Charlottesville put it out for all of their services, not just for the
I
library.
was thinking that'd be a good number for next, for the
It would be.
report.
It would. Finally, a reminder, Meredith reminded everybody about the Festival of the Book coming up, a reminder that JMRL is participating in the Same Page program. I didn't bring extra copies, but I do have copies of Ross Gay's book for anyone who's interested. It's going to be on that same day in the afternoon, making a presentation that is ticketed and it is highly coveted. So there's going to be a waiting room and an overflow there for people who want to come and be in the area. Mr. Gay will come around and talk to folks and sign books and whatnot, but it'll be in the overflow seating at this point. So good problems to have. Quite a change from the last few years of the festival, trying to figure out how many people are going to show up. It looks like it's going to be an overwhelming, a lot.
Much smaller festival.
Yes. That's all I have to report on.
So I would like to follow up on the logistical or procedural aspects of the mid-year review. And so I know we have a master calendar, different things we do typically in different months. Director's annual review is one of those that happens in May or June. But we wrote it down where it's supposed to happen. And we have a couple of years ago, we decided we wanted to do a director's goals in order to just understand, have an agreement or a shared understanding of what some focus areas would be. Although things changed, like kind of this year, stuff happened. My recollection is that also was a scheduled event that on a specific month, that's when we allocated a time to discuss that. So if we want to keep that, I would recommend that we, keep that, make sure it is on that master calendar and that we kind of stick to it. And if we're doing that at the mid-year review, which it's just a sort of an update, as you said, to me, it would make sense to also have that. But I'm advocating now, if we don't have that in a structured way, let's put it in as a structured way so we all, know what to expect and we can hit it consistently.
So, Mike, this is the document you're talking about. Yeah. It's the library board meeting and budget schedule. Yeah. Library director's annual evaluation is in May. January, library director mid-year goals update if requested. Yeah. I don't see anything in here about the goals themselves, so the board can add that for fiscal year 24. We could do it this spring and then
what do you, David, and everyone else think would be the right timing for that?
I think it would be around the same time as the annual evaluation.
Maybe it would be, my recollection now is maybe it was the month after that, so that during the evaluation, we were able to kind of discuss, well, here's the things that the board is interested in as focus areas. Yeah, so I would recommend putting that in this.
Yeah, it didn't make it in this one, but I seem to recall that it has been in the past.
Yeah.
So certainly something the board can have.
Okay. I would putting it on the table, but I would advocate for putting it in this doc so we can do it, be consistent.
I think. Everybody okay with that?
Good.
Other matters? Right. So future agenda items for our March meeting, which will be in Greene County.
We have a report from the 5-year plan.
Correct. We will have we'll vote on the policy 1.261.
We could shorten that a little, that number, a little long.
That, well, we are talking about renaming, reordering the whole thing, so that's a whole other can of worms.
Fraction.
It is time for the board to review fines and fees schedule, which happens annually. So I can send that out for you all with any red line edits that come from myself or the circulation manager of JMRL.
Were we holding that for this confidentiality? That's how it kind of came.
I think we were gonna remove.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Tie it back to whatever that policy ends up saying. Okay.
So I can explain that to the board.
And then we will have I guess the final report from the library name working group.
Yes.
Other things we will have on the agenda for that?
I'm interested in giving a continuing ed on the new series of feedback forms that JMRL has put out. This came out of the work the policy committee did on the JMRL suggestions, feedbacks, and something policy is a long name. But anyway, we've instituted some systems and we're starting to get some good data and responses. So I think the board would like to hear what that looks like.
Anything else? If not,
You mentioned it's in Greene County, right?
yes, I do. Does everybody know what that is?
And my apologies for not being even able to get to Louisa. Like a horror show, but
It's good to see you. Ed.
another,
You online?
I was trying to, but it was not happening.
Thank you for making the effort.
Anyone else ever watched their phone?
Oh, really?
It sounds like a long story.
The only other matter that I have is to remind everybody that Cecilia Payne is here, the manager of the Louisa Library, and she's prepared to give a tour of the building. And part of that will include a look at the lockers outside. For those interested.
And no other business. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And all those in favor? Great. So yes, let's.
To the locker.
Like